I used to commute on this old bike every day when I lived in London. I haven't used it, it's been stuck in this shed for about 20 years now. And I thought maybe an e-bike conversion kit might get my bike and me back on the road. And if that wasn't enough, my son wants me to accompany him on his Duke of Edinburgh cycling challenge. In today's video, a full 6 years after my last DIY bike vid, I'm going to be putting the Yosepower e-bike conversion kit to the test and see if somebody without any specialist knowledge or experience or tools can bring an old bike like this, kicking and screaming, back into frontline use. Now, unusually for vids on my channel, I have been paid to do today's video. But if you watch my vids regularly, you'll know that I don't do paid or sponsored videos unless I feel really excited and firmly believe in the thing that I'm talking about. Yosepower got in touch with me back in March this year about this e-bike conversion kit, and I couldn't resist putting it to the test. And as with all my videos, I'll be completely impartial and be pointing out any weaknesses I can see with the system and pitfalls I discovered along the way. But if you like what you see and you're in the market for one of these, there's a Black Friday deal running from 11th to the 24th of November. Check out the links in the description. Now you look at this bike, it is in working order, but it's in a bit of a sorry state. Needs a bit of a clean, and I could really do with a new seat. And the first job was to hunt out some of my old bike tools in preparation for the conversion. But I needn't worry because the kit comes supplied with most of the specialist tools you'll need except for an adjustable spanner. And speaking of that kit, you do need to make sure you choose the right one because you do have a few options. The simple part is choosing the right motor. You can choose between a freewheel and a cassette motor conversion kit. Now, freewheel motors are for 7-speed bikes. Most modern bikes like mine have cassettes, so this 250 watt version was the kit I needed. You can see there are 350 watt versions also on the website, but in the UK you need the 250 watt motor. I'm pretty sure anything over 250 watts is classified as a motorcycle for which you need a driving license. The more tricky thing, which sounds very simple, is making sure you buy the right sized wheel cassette motor kit. I got into a bit of a mess here because it didn't seem that straightforward to me measuring the wheel diameter, which kit I needed to go for. So I got my tape measure out, and with a tyre on it looked to be about 27.5 inches. I ended up ordering with a 27.5 inch diameter kit, and I got it tragically wrong. What I should have done is looked at the information on the actual tyre itself. 700C denotes a tyre width of 633 millimeters. I told you this wasn't straightforward, meaning I needed the 700C 28-inch conversion kit. So with that issue resolved, I could press on with the conversion. In the box you get a user manual, a triangle pannier, the new wheel containing the hub motor, a box with the specialist tools you'll need, 2 new brake levers and throttle lever, the LCD display and cables to connect everything together, and the 36-volt battery with integrated controller. And with all that unpacked, it's time to tackle headlong the most difficult part of the install. Switching the rear cassette from the old wheel to the new motorised one. To do this I had to take off the back wheel, and yes, this bike is so ancient it's got caliper rather than disc brakes, which I hate on account of the days as a kid I wasted trying to get them working on various bikes. With these released I could remove the wheel and separate it from the tyre and inner tube. It was time to remove the through axle from the old wheel so I could attach the freewheel sleeve and chain wrench provided in the kit to unscrew the cassette freewheel cover and remove the freewheel. Well, that was the idea anyway. This cassette has been attached to the bike since I bought it in about 1998 and it wouldn't budge, bending the chain wrench. So I improvised by jamming a bit of softwood noggin from the kitchen renovation against the cassette, which provided a much firmer locking mechanism, and being softwood didn't damage the cassette. And finally the freewheel cover and cassette could be removed. I gave the cassette a good clean with some multi-solve spray. I love this stuff, it's great to have a can around the house. And then it was just a question of putting the cassette back together on the new motorised wheel free hub, which you need to take the knot off so you can get the free wheel sleeve back on. Then it was back on with the inner tube and tyre, and the new wheel could be fixed back into place on the bike frame. I'd fully tightened those nuts when everything was assembled. Next it was onto the brake lever and throttle install. As you can see, my old grips were in a bit of a state and caused my hands to go numb once on a long cycle, so I decided it was due an upgrade and cut the old ones off. It's a pretty straightforward job attaching the new brake levers and throttle lever. At this point I had forgotten about that Allen or hex key set that came with the kit, so I used my old one. I bought a new pair of ergonomic grips on Amazon, and what I learned is there isn't room for 2 standard length grips. Basically it gets very congested, you end up having to push stuff onto the curved part of the handlebar. So it's important you buy a shorter one for the right hand grip where you're attaching the throttle lever. And whilst I started off with it here, it got in the way of the grip shift, so I moved it to here, which is much more comfortable. And also rotated over the cuffs on each grip so that the bolts didn't get in the way of my hand when I changed gears. With this done, you connect the original brake line into your new brake levers. Another nice easy job, installing the display. This is the bit where it all gets quite exciting, when you start to think, whoa, I've got an electric bike here. It goes on your left handlebar, and you need to remember later on to set the diameter of your wheel on the display. It was all going so well, something had to go wrong, and sure enough it did when I got to the PAS sensor. Taking off the left crank is straightforward enough, and there's a handy puller and hex wrench included in the kit, so you can effortlessly remove the pedal crank without so much as a hammer. But try as I might, I just couldn't get the PAS sensor to fit on the crank spline. If you forced it on, the sensor wouldn't rotate freely of the sensor housing. Bottom line, it doesn't fit the crank spline. For my bike at any rate, and I know other people have had this problem. It's just a little bit too wide. I've done a bit of research on this, and there is an alternative sensor available, but the other option is to increase the circumference of the sensor. And as I had a Dremel and had nothing to lose, I thought I'd give this a go. Clearly it's not ideal, as by doing this you lose the teeth which give it complete traction on the spline, but it enabled me to push the sensor into its locked position on the crank housing, and so far it's functioning fine. Let's check it rotates freely. Yeah, that's good. I could then reattach the crank and pedal, happy in the knowledge that the PAS sensor was in the correct position. Now, the battery and holder installation comes at the start of my user manual, but I left it to the end for some reason. It should be an easy install, bolting it where I used to have my water bottle holder, but as with the PAS sensor, I had to do a couple of mods. Firstly, the water bottle bolts have an integrated washer that doesn't fit the battery holder, so these had to be ground off. You could of course just buy new hex bolts online. Secondly, the design of the battery holder means there's no scope to slide it up and down the frame, and I had no further bolt holes on the frame to access this slot. And this became an issue as on my first test outing I realised the battery was hitting the front derailleur, preventing it from accessing the smallest cog. Luckily I bought a drill tap bit set when I installed our Starlink internet dish, and so I was able to tap a new hole further up the bike frame and screw the bolt in there instead. That gives the battery just enough space for the derailleur to work unimpeded. But fear not, you don't have to do this because Yosepower have an adjustment bracket to get around this situation. Not much to do now. I had the Panier to install, which I think is a really nice addition as it gives you the chance to stow loose cables. Now, speaking of those cables, it's pretty obvious how the cables all connect together. You've just got to decide how best to keep them looking neat and out of the way on your particular bike frame, which you get a load of zip ties in the kit to help you with. And here we have it. I didn't pass this main motor cable along this part of the bike frame as some people have, because quite frankly it wasn't long enough. You've got the brake, throttle and display cables here, which head back down to the controller, and then you've got your other main hub of cables here, all of which I think is quite neat, with one cable just poked into the pannier, as you can see there. Plan your route before you start using the zip ties, because you don't have enough to make too many mistakes. Let's not forget the new bike seat. God, that old one was uncomfortable, but this new one feels like I'm sitting on a cushion. Let's have a quick look at how it all works. So here's a finished bike in all its glory. I really should get a stand for my bike. Trouble is I haven't had a bike stand since I was a kid, since I probably had stabilisers. So you switch the battery on here, and there's that little weather cap there for where you charge it. And once you switch on the battery, you turn it on there on the display. First thing you see is the wheel diameter. I'll show you how to customise that in a minute. And you've got this little book that comes with it, which is really the only instructions that they give you on how to configure the bike. Display, it's all pretty self-explanatory. You've got your power settings from 1 up to 5, which is all you really use whilst you're cycling along. And put very simply, this is governing how much assistance you're getting whilst pedalling. You see PAS 1, which is sort of negligible power, is the eco setting. And then you go up to 3, which gives you a reasonable amount of power actually whilst you're pedaling along, and that's normal. And then you've got the two most powerful settings, 4 and finally 5. You've then got a power bar that you'll see in a minute during the road test, your speed in miles or kilometre an hour, which you can adjust in the settings. You've got your battery status bar here, which as you can see, I've got 2 bars left and we've cycled 14.6 miles. The range is a lot more than that, but don't forget I've been using this almost exclusively on very steep hills. You go into the settings by holding down the settings button, and you need to go into these settings because basically there's your trip. You can also reset on this screen. You need to change the wheel diameter. That's where you adjust between mile an hour or kilometers an hour, depending on which one you want to use. And so that's the main settings. You press setting again to take it back to the main screen. And if you want to see a little backlight, you just press the power button. Once you're in the settings menu, you can access the advanced settings by holding the setting button and the down key for another 10 seconds. This gives you the ability to customize the speed sensor, pedal assist, PAS sensitivity and throttle settings, as well as the ampage. But I'm told these are already optimized out of the box and the wheel diameter is all that you really need to change. But do let me know in the comments if there are any changes that are worth making here. Now, I don't know why, but I did slightly imagine that that lever would be some sort of wonder gadget that you could toggle down to find the bike shooting forward when you needed that extra power. But unfortunately, that really isn't what it's there for. In the EU, it's been limited to, I think, 6 kilometers an hour. In the same token that we're limited to a 250 watt motor, I understand, in Europe. But I understand this throttle isn't there for speed. This is pretty much all you get when you toggle the throttle lever. Use I could find for the throttle was to initially power the bike forward when you're getting on, or perhaps trying to get a bit of momentum before getting those pedals turning, which in itself is pretty useful. See, I'm just cruising now without pedaling, and that I think is the purpose of the throttle lever. But don't worry about these limits because we're now on to the positives. I've been out on this bike quite a lot since completing the conversion. As I said, I've cycled nearly 15 miles almost continuously uphill, pretty much in PAS setting 5. I've still got 2 bars left on the battery, which I think is pretty impressive. And with all that in mind, let's see how I got on. Going up this steep hill here, and we're in PAS setting 3 at the moment. Just waiting for the bike to kick in. Here we go. There's a bit of a delay there. There isn't normally. Anyway, we're up and running now. Full power. I can actually go down to 3, and that will get me up this hill quite happily. So if you're going on a long distance journey and you're wanting to conserve power and you're not worried about razzing up a hill, you probably keep it in setting 3. Setting 2 would be a bit slow. I just felt it kick back in speed and I'm really having to sort of help it now. Setting 3, you can suddenly, I mean, you probably noticed that, but yeah, the bike's gone sped up. And I'm going to go a bit faster now because I've got to get back in the next 25 minutes to pick my son up from somewhere. So you notice that we're on PAS 5, the bike has immediately sped up and we're up to 14 miles an hour cruising up this pretty massive hill. And this is not putting me to any exertion at all. I'm literally just pedaling to keep the power running through the rear motor. Let this car go through. Now, from a standing start, I'm in the wrong gear really for this. But suddenly you get an upshift in power. And away we go again. Sort of going downhill now, so no piles are required. And I can't really, there's a little bit of drag. Don't forget, when you're pedaling without any power, you are pedaling against the motor. So it's not going to feel quite the same as it did before you converted the bike. But when you're going down the hill, that's not really going to matter. And you can switch through the settings. Shows you the time you've been going for, all time mileage and trip for the journey. just kicked in on that tiny bit of a hill where I started pedaling in a lower gear. I mean, that's quite clever. Right, got a little bit of a test I want to put it to now. We've got two hills coming up now. This is the first one, which isn't a major hill really, but again, it wouldn't be very pleasant on a normal bike. And now we're on a quiet lane. I'm going to switch off the voice isolation so you can hear the motor properly. Haven't even gone down onto the lowest cog yet. And I'm absolutely razzing up this hill. Going on to the lowest cog now because this hill here is a little bit steeper. You can hear the motor now. Pretty decent gradient this. It's just not putting me to any effort at all. But the hill I really want to show you is this one, infamous as being really steep. Now, when I did this earlier on a full battery, it did feel a little bit more powerful. But even now, it's doing a pretty good job, enabling me to go up a couple of gears, or down, whatever it is. Really should have jammed up on gear terminology before I started this. 6 miles an hour, full power, on a very steep hill. And minimal exertion on my part. We're nearly at the summit. We're nearly at the summit. I can go up a couple of gears. And that was very impressive. I'm back onto the middle cog. And I haven't even got to the summit yet. Thanks. Now the other thing to remember is when you put your brakes on, the power, as you saw there, completely disappeared, which is a great safety feature and the reason why you have to replace those brake levers. And that, my friends, is the end of this road trial. I hope you found it interesting and useful. Back inside the kitchen renovation because the weather's horrible today. So what conclusions can we draw from this conversion? Well, the thing that's really struck me about this, I've been cycling around quite a lot this week whilst road testing it, popping in to see friends and stuff, and having the motorized kit on your bike suddenly massively expands where you can go on your bicycle. It sort of almost makes you feel like you're traveling places in a car. By taking all that effort out of the journey, it expands the opportunities of where you can get to. And the brilliant thing about it is by turning that PAS sensor setting down from say 3 to 2, you can increase the amount of effort you're putting in and therefore keep fit while cycling this machine. It's a sophisticated bit of kit and it's turned an unloved bike that I was basically never going to use again into something I'm now going to use regularly. I had a few tricky moments as you saw doing the conversion, but I was really improvising on stuff that you can buy proper parts for online. And also I think it's pretty cool that you can motorize a bike that's over 25 years old. Admittedly, this isn't an exhaustive review. I've basically cycled 22 miles since carrying out the conversion, but so far so good. It's worked absolutely seamlessly, other than the odd moment when there's been a sort of few second lag going up a hill before the power kicks in. But that really, honestly, is the only criticism I can think of at the moment. And that's more down to, I guess, the gears I was in and the way I was pedaling at the time. What's more, you get an 18-month warranty, so anything that does go wrong in this period, you can get it sorted out. On price at £375, I suppose you'd say it's not cheap, but I think you're getting a lot of kit for your money. You can also get a discount with my voucher code, which you'll find in the description below the vid. And if you were looking at an actual e-bike rather than converting an existing, the prices for this sort of thing start at about £650 upwards. And the way I feel about this, upcycling an old machine like this, has saved me money off what a new e-bike would have cost and makes me feel pretty good. So that's it for today. I'll put links in the description as to where you can get hold of one of these conversion kits. I do get a small commission if you buy through one of my links, which helps me to keep making this content, so I can't thank you enough for that. And don't forget about the Black Friday sale. Next week, I'm back to the kitchen renovation. I've got so many videos in the pipeline, so please stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, if you're new to my channel, it'd be great to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here, and don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all my future uploads. See you soon.